Hello and welcome to this computing web seminar on enterprise data governance. My name's Stuart Sumner, editor of Computing, and I'll be your host. The value of data to the organisations that create it has come into renewed focus recently with the current interest in big data. Companies are being urged to gain a competitive edge by mining their information resources for new insights and business ideas. This is all well and good, but are insights gleaned from a billion bad records really very valuable? Above and beyond its value to analytics, the quality and integrity of data assets has a profound impact on the financial health and business integrity of any enterprise. But how many organisations today treat data with the same degree of rigour and governance as, say, cash on the balance sheet? What people, procedures and tools do they have in place to manage data in this way? That's exactly what we're going to be discussing today, and joining me today for this discussion, I'm delighted to welcome four panellists. First, I'm pleased to welcome Suresh Daniels, Group Data Architect at JP Coates.
Hello.
And from SAP, we're pleased to welcome Scott Barrett, Director of Strategy.
Hello.
We're also delighted to see Clive Bellmore, Founder and Managing Director of ENTOTA.
Hello.
Also with us today is John Leonard, Research Editor at Computing.
Hello.
OK, before I hand over to our first panellist today, just a few points of housekeeping. So you can see on your screen in front of you, hopefully us. We'll be presenting a few slides for you later on today. They will come up automatically on your screens. No need for you to do anything there. I'll also be opening up a couple of interactive polls for you today, so please do answer those. Again, they will come up on your screens automatically. There are two buttons, however, on your screens which I'd like to draw your attention to. The first and most important one is Q&A. That enables you to ask your questions to us here in the studio. They'll come through to me here on the laptop, and I'll put them to our panel here. Please do get your questions in early. What often happens is I get a sudden flood of questions with about 5 minutes to go, which of course means I sadly can't answer very many of them. So please do get them in as early as possible, and we'll put them through here to the panel. The other button is biographies, which enables you to learn a bit more about us here in the studio today. OK, that is the end of the housekeeping. So, poor quality data can have many repercussions, from an erosion of productivity and slow business decision-making through to more serious consequences such as failed projects, reputational damage and failure to comply with legally enforced regulations. But many organisations don't know where to start the process of improving data quality. This web seminar will give you a few pointers. So before I introduce John, I'm going to open up the first poll question for you today. That should be coming up on your screens now. And it's multiple choice, as you can see. And we are asking, which of the following statements best describes data quality in your organisation? And please do be honest. We'll be able to see your answers, but we won't be able to see who answered them. So fear no reprisals there. First of all, you can be very honest and say we do little or no active data quality control. Or data quality is controlled at entry, but not managed after that. Or we actively cleanse data, but only in a single domain or discrete systems. We have a full data quality platform and clean data across multiple domains using consistent rules. Or, indeed, we have a full data quality shared service or centre of excellence, in which case, well done you. You can also answer don't know, but if you're not quite sure, then please do just have a guess. OK, I'll close that poll and feedback the results to you in about 10 to 15 minutes or so. OK, now for some background on data management. John's going to present the results of a recent computing survey of 130 senior IT strategists at medium to large organisations.
Thank you very much, Stuart. This first slide looks at how data is managed and integrated. Slightly less than half of the respondents to computing survey had one or more siloed data marts or single domain data warehouses, for example, for customer data. Only a fifth, that's 20%, had mature multi-domain enterprise warehouses, and a similar proportion, 19%, had no data warehouses or data marts at all. So what does this mean? On to the next one. Customer data is the domain most likely to be covered by a data warehouse or a data mart. 86% confirm this, followed by financial data at 73%, and then product and employee data. Customer data represents the fastest growing domain due to the increasing use of sophisticated transactional websites and social media. It also attracts a high level of interest from organisations due to its importance, leading firms to mine the data for business advantage. Therefore, proper management and storage of customer data is becoming increasingly important.
Fantastic, thanks John. OK, so to summarise then, most firms have some sort of data mart or data warehouse in place. but they're more likely than not to represent silos of data rather than a true sort of cross-domain system. And customer data is most likely to be held in a data warehouse. That's what we found by surveying our audience. Scott, are there any surprises there? Is that what you see from your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, and Suresh is going to spend some time on this later, I believe, but fundamentally companies, organizations really are trying to either increase revenue, of course, or decrease costs, and focusing on customer is generally the best way to get a understanding of your customer. 360-degree view is often where companies start and really kind of learn how to do this right and get the data right. Suresh, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say that as well, because previously, there's three really categories that I would put this issue into. I would say technology, because the technology enable you the bandwidth, the storage, so people went to different silos. And then it was a strategy, because it was globalization that brings things together now. And before it was in different regions, it was localized, but now it's global village now. And things have changed in that. And next thing is the information. Now information is a key. It's a competitive advantage now to have the quick information in your hand. So these are the three categories that I see has made it more important for people to get it centralized.
Sure. Okay. So from what we've seen from John's research earlier, we had 19% of people saying they have no data warehouses or data marts in place at all, and then 43%, so the vast majority, saying they have one or more siloed data marts. So they do have something, but it's siloed. It's not cross-domain. Clive, what sort of risks are there to the business? How can that affect the business, having this sort of really inadequate data warehousing policy?
I think just having a lack of intelligence as to what's really going on in the business is fairly fundamental. We were chatting to an Australian telco a while back. We sort of said, what sort of issues do you have around data quality? And he launched into a tirade about employees. What was the problem? Well, they had a headcount freeze on for 6 months within their business, because they'd consolidated employees, and actually they should have been hiring for 6 months instead of firing. So there was a fairly fundamental, risky data quality consolidation problem, which has a big impact on the business.
Of course, yes. Scott, are there any other examples you can think of? What other ways can this sort of poor data quality go straight to the business and affect it adversely?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think Suresh had it. The idea is, there's data and then there's information, and the analytics side of the business. At SAP, we talk a lot with organizations about operational side of the business, improving processes to make the business more efficient and more profitable. But a lot of this comes down, in many cases, to data quality affecting the analytics side of the business. How do you understand? How does that data become valuable information to your organization that is actionable and quickly, you can understand what's going on? If you don't have that, again, you can have, HR problems. You can have. We had an insurance company in the U.S. I worked with that had a churn problem that was about 25% higher than they thought it was once they had actually cleaned the data up appropriately, and many places like that it can come up, of course.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for that. There's a question coming from the audience. It's around security and compliance. What advice is there around security and compliance around data retention and data warehousing? Who feels best qualified to answer that one? Clive, you look like you're going to take a plunge.
Thanks for that. Around the retention, I think it's important as you're looking at your business process and your data to actually start defining the retention policies for a particular data object within a given business process. So I think people tend to treat these in silos. I'll do a data definition, then I'll do some archiving. In reality, it's the whole life cycle of a piece of data that you need to start capturing and sharing and collaborating around, which will include things like retention and security.
I was going to say, two aspects of this. One is who has the rights to work with particular data, who has the rights to see if it's HR data, so what we've actually done at SAP is leverage a lot of the expertise we have around the analytics side and using some of our business objects enterprise platform technology to administer that kind of security and granularity as we pull the business users into the process, which is what we're trying to do here, because they know what the data is best supposed to look like. So on the one hand, you want to make sure that the right people can see the data they're supposed to without having to manually do a lot of work with that, and so we've taken care of that by leveraging our reporting platform. And then the other side, as Clive said, is the idea of understanding the data life cycle. From the point you understand your data, clean it up, how long do you need to keep it, and then ultimately can you archive it and can you delete it? And we've again addressed that through things like information lifecycle management solutions that actually manage those retention policies inside the SAP world or outside the SAP world. So.
I guess part of that then is around efficiency. It's about the right information going to the right people at the right time, rather than people having to dig for it somewhere and not finding it, or finding the wrong records or bad records, that sort of thing. That comes down to efficiency, it seems.
Yep, absolutely.
I think it's just one place to go to see what is going on with a piece of data. people tend to treat, they'll do an archiving project in a silo, they'll do a BI project in a silo. In reality, that needs to be one collaborative environment that you can see what's going on in your business.
Sure, fantastic.
When you talk about compliance now, even if you take a small charity that I have helping with, even you will find if they are claiming gift aid, they need to store data for 5 years. They need to trace back. So there are compliances that you have, regulations that you need to do as well. Systems tends to go off, like you have legacy systems now, you have ERP systems. They tend to change, but your data will stay forever. So you need to know about the regulations and draw up your policy, data policy very carefully.
Sure, thanks for that. Okay, so to summarise, there's various ways in which poor data can affect the business. There's things like invoices in the wrong places, a valuable customer could be accidentally slighted, you miss opportunities, there's inefficiency, duplicated effort, reinventing the wheel, all that sort of thing. So these are the reasons why companies need to take more care in the way that they manage their data. But what types of data did the survey respondents find most needed cleansing?
Okay, thank you, Stuart. On to the next slide. Covers very much the topics that we've just been discussing. Poor quality or inconsistent data could affect any or all of the data domains in an organisation. Interestingly, though, considering that customer data is the most likely to be stored in a data warehouse, this particular domain was the one that suffered most data quality problems. Now, this may be because of errors in customer data quickly become obvious, or possibly because this data changes more rapidly. Whatever the reason, it does show that simply dropping data into a data warehouse is not enough to ensure quality.
Fantastic, thanks John. Okay, so is customer data the place to start for most organisations seeking to get a grip on their enterprise data? Is customer data really the best starting point? And I think I'll put that to you first, Scott.
I think it depends is the answer, like with many things. I think customer can have the quickest impact on the bottom line or on increasing the bottom line if you have a good ability to get a handle on that. Right now we're working with a large utility here in the UK, and they have a fairly simple business model. They sell three things essentially, and they want to understand who has one of those or two of those, so then they can try to offer them the other one when they call in for support or questions around their bill. So for them, I think customer is a fairly well understood domain. I think the problem set is fairly simple for them to solve, and so they're really going after that now, and they see a fairly quick return on value. If I contrast that to some of the larger B2C companies, like some of the large cell phone companies like that are out there. They have millions and millions of customers, and what they've done from a master data standpoint is they focused on product and vendor and material to learn how to kind of eat the elephant one bite at a time. They know the biggest payoff is with customer, but it's also a huge problem if you think about all the different types of handsets you could be offering, all the different types of plans that customers are on as these big providers have come together, millions and millions of consumers out there. Again, big payoff, but big project, and so they've been working on the smaller domains to get there ultimately. So I think it depends.
Okay, so people shouldn't necessarily look to customer data and think that's the be-all and end-all as regards the jumping-off point. That's just one of the types of data that's important, not necessarily the key for every organisation.
It depends on your business, depends on your goals, yeah.
I'm surprised to see vendor so low, to be honest, in that survey. I mean, from what I've seen, you can get very quick benefits from accurate consolidation of things like vendor. Direct cost savings.
That's true, and I think the thing with customer is there are many CRMs coming. I think I've seen many documents saying it's about 18 billion this year, the value of the whole CRM. And there are a lot of CRMs coming into the business, and people want to have the ERP and CRMs match together, so they go on with the custom master data. And next thing is, if you don't know your customer well, you won't be in the business. And it's easy to sell because it's a marketing who has a big say in the organization, because it's more marketing domain, market-oriented organizations than product-oriented. So you tend to do more customer area, and there's a lot of sponsorship quickly. That's some of the key where you find the figure on customer is higher.
So you mentioned marketing there, and that's one departmental owner of some of the types of data. I mean, is this ownership problem part of the problem, in that all the data is not necessarily coming, well, it's definitely not coming under one department. You've got lots of different areas of the business, all with valuable data, all with ownership of that data. Is the ownership question, is that part of the problem, that the data is potentially sort of sprawled out all over the enterprise, all over the architecture under different domains? Is that part of the problem, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, we were working recently with a large manufacturer up in the Midlands, and they had actually stood up, because they had the sponsorship from their marketing organization and kind of outside of IT, they had stood up an entire data warehouse around customer, or actually around vendor, trying to understand spend analysis. They thought they could really reduce their costs if they could understand how much they were actually spending in total with different suppliers. And so they'd gone after that, but they'd stood up an entire enterprise data warehouse to try to solve that problem. And 4 years later, they still couldn't answer the question. We went in and found out that actually most of of the data they needed was already inside their SAP system. They didn't need to externalize it and understand it, and they could simplify their environment, save a lot of money, and quickly get to those answers by tackling that problem and then reduce the bottom line. So again, I think it all depends on, you're right, vendor being so low is surprising, because for them that was the big, for spend analysis, that was a huge value for them to get that right, and they hadn't been able to get it right yet. So.
And I think one of the other issues with warehouses is people tend to chuck everything into a data warehouse and assume that it's going to be the single view. But you just get one place with lots of silos in one place, and you still don't get the insight across businesses. And it's that pre-consolidation cleansing which is key to getting the value out of the data.
And what are the first steps? What information do you need to lead into the first steps to go through that process?
Well, from the way we approach it, the first thing is looking at the data standards, trying to get a consistent definition of customer vendor material, and that in itself is hard. Politically hard, change management hard, technically hard, but it's achievable, and the value of doing that is actually incredibly valuable. So data standards, governance, defining the quality metrics around a piece of data, and then from that build on top of that. I don't know what you find.
Yeah, well, in our business we find like there's sometimes different ways of trading, the way you trade with different people. Like if you're trading with Walmart or some big organization, there are different ways that you do, and you find, okay, I want to take the vendor data. I want to say reduce my net working capital. I want to put everything on 60 days, or because for my customers I give 30 days and 60 days, so I want to get a good net working capital. Then you find, I can't do it in different parts. But sometimes you might be having a policy already, but you're not seeing all the details because you don't have a proper matching, or the data is not in place to make the quick information of saying, okay, what are the legislations you have, risks you have, laws that you have to comply with. You don't see them because you just make decisions sometimes. So it's good to have in one place, but it's a big job to get things into one place.
I was going to I've learned a lot from working with Suresh over the last couple of months. What he taught me was that to find the smallest possible problem that you can identify that has the largest impact, and if you can tie those two together, if it's small enough to actually solve and quantify and identify from the business standpoint what that would bring to the business, then you can tackle that and show the value very quickly and have a big impact on the business, which gets you buy-in for the next step and the next step. But that's people often try to boil the ocean and say, I want to solve all my customer data problems at once, and it's just too big of a problem. So start small, high impact, and then work from there.
Sure, thanks for that. We just had a question here from the audience. It's a bit of a billion-dollar question, and it's certainly not a yes or no answer. I'm going to throw it at you, Scott, and you're not going to thank me for it, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Just do what you can with it.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
This introduction. So the question is the cloud a secure way to store and access information? As I said, not a yes or no answer.
Well, if you look at, from an SAP standpoint, cloud is one of our 5 major, routes to market now. So if you look at, for us, it's now applications, analytics, cloud, mobility, which is a way to consume information, and then database and technology, which kind of includes data governance, which we're here today to talk about. I see the cloud very simply as just a place that you're putting your information. I mean, at the end of the day, companies have more choices than ever. Do you host your own data center? Do you outsource your data center, but you still own it? Do you host and outsource? Do you put it in a private cloud? Do you put it in a public cloud? I think cloud is such a huge, broad area. So the answer is, again, we have some trusted partners that have private cloud options that I think are as secure as anything you'd ever have in your own building, with all your data. If you're sticking it on the big I internet and calling that the cloud, that's a vastly different kind of question. But in general, yes, we're moving more and more to, we actually have Amazon Cloud set up ourselves that we use with all our technology set up in. So if we're working with a customer like Coates, we'll take some of their data very securely, we'll put it into that, we'll analyze it, understand some of the problems, and use that to show results, versus 2 or 3 years ago we were trying to run all that on a laptop and take it back to a customer and install it in their data center. So I think you can make you much more, there are places you can use the cloud. And for us at SAP, a lot of the backbone technology around how do you move the data from a data center into a cloud, between something like an Ariba and an SAP ERP, those are huge problems that we're tackling right now, but I think you have to have the right types of technologies to help you securely move the data around, protect it in the right ways. But yeah, I mean, the cloud is the future, so absolutely.
Sure. I think that's a very, given the scale of the question, that's a very succinct answer, which is excellent. Okay, now, so we've been talking about the common issues around data quality. Let's have a look at what the audience has been saying. So we're going to close the first poll question, and I'm going to feed back the results to you now. when it comes up on my screen. Here we are. Okay, so we asked, which of the following statements best describes data quality in your organisation? And lots of people plumped for the sort of first 3 points, although data quality is controlled at entry but not managed after that. About a third of, or just under a third of people said. About a quarter said we do little or no active data quality control. Another quarter said we actively cleanse data, but only in a single domain or discrete in single domain or discrete systems. So that's the vast majority of people. Probably they would admit being a bit inadequate around data quality control. There's just under 10% saying we have a full data quality platform and clean data across multiple domains using consistent rules. And 3% saying we have a full data quality shared service centre of excellence. So that 3%, give yourselves a big pat on the back. The rest of you could do better. I mean, that paints a mildly alarming picture. Is that surprising to us, though? Is that what we're seeing, out of the marketplace? What are your views, Clive?
I mean, it's interesting that read your screen. People get data into things like SAP, and they spend a lot of time cleaning the data up and trying to understand what's going on. Turn SAP on and then go, oh, we're done now. But then you've got all these problems afterwards where you've got interfaces coming in, you've got data entry, and actually the same rules that you define for moving your data through migration are actually what you should be applying post-go live to make sure they're being adhered to. So I think people need to take a sort of a longer view and sort of say, if I'm applying some rules here, let's do them post-go live and then put some governance in place and measure it moving forwards.
Yeah. No, I was just to build on that, I was at a large utility company. I've been spending a lot of time in telco this year, seems like. But I walked in and they just finished, for one large piece of their business, implementing SAP, the core ERP system. And I walked into one senior vice president's office. We had a nice meeting. We were talking about data governance. You've heard this story. We were talking about data governance, and he said, I've just implemented SAP. I've just spent a lot of money with you guys and our implementation partner. We cleaned up the data. We migrated the data using your technology and the expertise of our partners and our implementation partners and our business folks. We put every screen in SAP now has pick lists, drop-down lists. We fixed our data quality problems by fixing the process, and that's what we sold to our board while we were going down this route. And so we're done, and we don't really need to talk anymore about data governance. And I said thank you and walked out of his office, and I went about half the way around the building on the same floor and sat down with another SVP, also part of the same part of the business, who immediately said, hey, what are you doing about data governance? And he said, I'm actually going to the board right now and asking for £15 million to start a data governance initiative because our data is awful in this part of the business. It's just, and he had example after example after example of governance and data quality problems they had. These guys worked in the same part of the business. They reported up to the same CIO, but they had vastly different perceptions of what they needed to do. So I think, it all depends on, process does fix a lot of the problems and fixes the input issues like these guys are talking about. If you get the inputs right in your CRM system, your ERP, your website, and then you do some basic cleansing in real time, that definitely helps. But there's always more. You need to do it.
Constant. It should be a business as usual activity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the correct. This should be rolled into how you deploy your IT projects, how you do data entry, how you do migration. It all should be business as usual, embedded within your business. I don't know whether you agree with the vision.
I agree with that because we made the same mistake as well. So we put SAP, we had templates, everybody followed the same template, rolled out. But you find you have standards, but people they interpret the standards in different ways. So what happens is you don't have a proper auditing procedures at the front end. And sometimes people want to just create it quickly. They want to get their sales order quickly or do their work quickly. They want to finish it. There's a load on them. So they tend to pick a drop-down value very quickly and just go on because it doesn't affect them, but it affects down line in the boardroom. So it's a very good point. It should be part of the operations. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, we're going to have to push on. Time is eventually going to be against us. So I'm going to now open up the second poll, and that's going to come up on your screens any moment now. This time we are asking, are your organisation's primary data repositories ever cleaned up or deduplicated? And again, multiple choice. You could answer as the data governance policy dictates, when we have time, annually or thereabouts, or the data pertinent to each project is cleaned at the commencement of the project, or we did it once or never. And again, you've got about 10 to 15 minutes or so to answer that question, then I will close it and feed back the results. Okay, so we've looked at where data problems tend to lie, but what are the effects of bad data? John, I think you've got some research on this.
I have, Stuart. Thank you. According to Gartner, documented studies have shown that more than $600 billion is lost due to data quality problems amongst North American companies. Indeed, Generic loss of productivity is the known adverse effect of poor quality data, most identified by respondents to our survey at 49%, followed by slow business decision making, which comes in at 37%. After this, we have problems with compliance, data integration, and information used in business decision making.
Fantastic, thanks, John. So, Clive, have you got examples? I mean, John mentioned productivity loss there. Do you have any examples from your experience of working with companies of how data governance or good data governance can improve productivity?
Yeah, and I think it sort of comes down to governance should really drive a lot of reuse and agility within IT. I'll open this question, challenge me at any point where you think I'm talking nonsense. But you tend to find that every time you do an IT project, you do the same thing again and again and again. So, you know, what does material look like? And you're writing an interface, and I'm talking to someone over there. Someone else is doing the same thing. And if you can start to sort of standardize the way that you collaborate and govern your data definitions, your business rules, the savings on that alone across multiple projects can be huge. So, you know, by really taking control of how you define the rules and quality rules around bits of data, that single step will give you massive benefits. But again, you know, it's not that simple. It's not a question of just dumping it into a website and that's it. It's an ongoing governance business process. I don't know if you open that up to you.
The example that came to mind when you were talking about the example there was, you know, we have a customer that if you can embed data quality and some of these sort of things into the fabric of your organization, it's not a back-end process, it's not just something that's wrapped around your warehouse, but actually something you're doing on an ongoing basis. The best example I have was a customer in the US that determined for every new customer they signed up where they got the address wrong, they were doing it over the phone in a call center, that the cost to remediate that was $275. And they actually tracked and quantified, well, what do you do? What is your process when you have a bad address? You send out your first invoice, it comes back. How does that work? And they're a big company, so it was quite complicated to essentially just get back on the phone with the right person and say, we got your address wrong, could you correct it for us? And they did that, and that was about 2.5% of all of the mail they sent out came back as bad information, their invoices. And there's an impact on days sales outstanding for collections. There's a lot of different places that comes into play. They figured out that if they could just build in a process that checked the address inside of SAP CRM, as soon as they tabbed off the field, it actually checked the address in real time and returned back and said, oh, while you had the person on the phone, they actually said, well, that cost us $0 to fix that, and it makes for a better customer experience, and on and on and on. So I think the more you can weave it into the structure of your organization versus it being seen as a batch process or something that IT owns, the better, really you can quantify that, improve, you know, how many more calls per hour can you take, how much more efficient can you be. So those are the kind of quantifications that really do have an impact.
And that comes down to a communication issue of making sure every different part of the business understands the need for the need and their responsibility towards the data hygiene.
Yeah, and being that granular about it. You have to think about addresses, you have to think about standards, you have to think about, you know, all these sorts of things. And it's hard because people have to sit in a room and decide silly things like, what's our corporate standard for the word street? Is it ST period? Is it capital ST? You know, is it spelled out? We don't know, but you have to decide. And then.
Yeah. If I would take the next extent, I would add into it saying in a production organization, you might want to aggregate things to manufacture in bulk. So if you don't have proper standards, you might be producing the same thing in 5 different places. Whereas if you have good standards, you might think, oh, this is good to produce in bulk in one place. Then you get the economy of scale. So you reduce your cost and improve your productivity. So those things really add. You don't think that a small data element can make such a big difference. Yeah, it could. When you aggregate all together, you find, oh, we could have made, say, millions here.
It's so classically, whenever I talk to CIOs, they say, why can't we do the same project again and again? We always reinvent the wheel every time we do a project. And I think governance, for me, is one of the core reasons, if you don't do this, that you can't do that. So you end up doing the same thing differently every single time. I mean, data migration is a classic example. If you're rolling SAP across, different regions, unless you get this stuff done, you're not going to get your economies of scale.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a good question coming in from the audience, which I, for the sake of habit, I'm going to toss at Scott again. If you are delivering analytical insight in real time, how do you ensure data quality in real time so that you're not feeding people garbage on which they're going to base instant decisions?
No, it's a great question, and you know, with using some of our new in-memory technologies that we have out there, like HANA and IQ and the real-time data platform, you know, what that gives you access to is once the data is in there, what's beautiful about it is whether you're using an iPad, a mobile device, however you're getting to the data, you can ask questions in the boardroom, in a meeting, and get immediate answers. You know, but as you said in your opening, you know, a billion bad records gives you instant access to the wrong decisions. And so I think having the data quality mechanisms, again, woven into the fabric or the way the data flows into that real-time, you know, kind of data platform, into that HANA or whatever it is that you're using for that is critical. And you have to, and the way you get those business rules right is you do it during your data migration process, you do it during your, when you're mastering your data, and then you aggregate those rules in a single platform. So as the data flows in, it's being checked, it's being validated, so then you know the data in there is as clean as you can get it, and you're improving over time by adding more and more rules to that. So I think it is important to have those data quality, you know, metrics in place at input. When it moves from the operational side of the business to the analytics side of the business, so you can make those real-time decisions, the data has to definitely be, you know, clean.
But I'm not sure you should be applying those data quality rules in real time.
No.
You know, you fix at source, and during that sort of creation CRUD process, I'm not sure you should be considering doing real-time data quality.
Well, it depends. I think on the operational side, just to go back to our previous example, checking an address upon input in CRM, that's
Sure,
real-time
yeah,
data quality
that's fair point.
operationally.
Yeah.
But once you move to the analytics side, you're right. The data needs to be cleaned before it hits the warehouse, before it hits the data mart, so then you can get the best answers in real time. Yeah, that's a good point.
I thought we could have a nice feisty disagreement there for a moment, but it turns out we
Well,
are
no,
agreeing.
We're violently agreeing, so yeah.
Yeah, but I think having somewhere that you can go and sort of look at a particular data object that supports the process and go, what is the score for this piece of data? Can I trust the decision I'm about to make? I've not seen many companies do that successfully.
No, and you know, but I have seen some great examples where customers have, particular business users have a question they want to ask the data to interrogate in real time on a very large data set, and the question can be, you know, again, show me for our business all the places where this particular product or color or class is used in this or this or this, so I can look at a business problem like manufacturing and being improvement. You don't want to wait a week and have to go off to IT to pull that back. You'd like to know right away, you know, how to answer that kind of, and that's kind of a data quality question, but you'd like to be able to interrogate that in real time and get the results back and understand it. So you definitely can ask questions in real time that affect data quality, but I don't think you want to be cleaning up your data downstream in your analytic systems.
I have a small different view as well. Right, at the creation point is you control data quality, and one issue that we face in encounter is like before it goes downstream to production, we need to capture and see if there's something wrong in it. Is the bombs right? Is the routings right? Because if you go hit production, it takes a long time to get it corrected. You need to delete the whole thing, put the sales orders again. So somewhere times it has to be real time. The thing is we have, if you take SAP, there are a lot of tables, a lot of things, how to check. So there are new tools, like even SAP has a lot of good tools now where you can check things real time. But do you want to do it or not? It depends on the criticality of the data element that you are looking at.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Sure. Fantastic. Okay, thanks for that. Another question here from the audience. I'll put it to you, Clive, to begin with, just for the sake of being a bit different.
I'll pass it over to Scott.
Instantly, that'll be fine. Is loss of productivity a sales or operational metric, or both?
Wow. Say that again.
Is loss of productivity a sales or operations metric, or both? Is it something that should be measured by sales or operations, or both, or should be measured somewhere else entirely?
I mean, what is loss of productivity? It's interesting. We people come and sort of say we want to do a proof of concept around information steward. We had this conversation really around a drinks company, and they're saying, you know, we want to measure loss of productivity, whatever that means, around a particular process. How do you do that? Yes, you apply it wherever there's a problem. It's quite a sort of weird question, but we sort of said to this customer, can you actually give us how much money you're going to lose around this problem? And they really struggled to, and I said, well, if you can't do that, why are you doing it? So when they actually went away to the business and started asking those questions, they could actually start saying, a failed row here will cost this much to fix, and then tying those back. So I'm not sure that actually answers the question, but I'd say yes.
Yeah, okay. That sort of ties into how do you build the business case, I mean, which I think Suresh is going to tell us about in a moment, but it also ties into something else I was going to say, coming back to John's research from a few moments ago. He talks about the top two adverse effects that poor data quality has on the organisation. Well, about 50% is loss of productivity, and 37% was slow business decision making. And it strikes me those are two factors that go straight to the bottom line. Loss of productivity means, you know, poor value for money from your staff, from your wage budget. Slow business decision making is an opportunity cost. So some of these effects are going straight to your bottom line. So I guess it shouldn't be too hard to work out how much money you're losing through your poor data quality hygiene. Scott, is that a fair statement?
It is. You know, at the end of the day, you know, and one of the main reasons that SAP has made some of the investments we've made, you know, SAP for 25 years was all about the operational side of the business, right? Improving processes, improves your bottom line, and improves your generally your productivity of your organization. It was very focused on that side of the house. With the acquisition of the business objects analytic technology, we understand that companies are also trying to understand their business so they can then improve, you know, revenue or whatever the case may be. So, you know, the data actually stripes across both sides of the house, and generally when you really get your true efficiencies of scale, you're building a common set of master data, a common set of business rules that can be used on both sides of the house. So you have continuity, so your reporting is more consistent, but also your operational data is more consistent. So it goes both ways, and you know, as the sales is operational, it depends on the problem. Again, it depends on the question you're asking and what data you're looking at. You know, if it affects your salespeople or your retail or your revenue side, then it's a sales problem. If it affects your manufacturing or whatever, it's more of an operational back-end problem. So it kind of depends on where you are in the organization. But I think what I like about being part of SAP is we talk about the data in the operational systems and in the analytical systems, and you got to get it right in all those places, not just, in this case, a lot of the questions we've worked with computing on, and you guys has been around the analytical systems and the data marts and that sort of thing, which is a very appropriate way to start. But I think you have to think about it in both contexts.
Sure, fantastic, thanks for that. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the business case so far already. Suresh, we were talking earlier about this. How do you go about building the business case? How do you sort of sell this to the board, this concept of needing to improve your data quality hygiene and put in a proper data governance structure?
Right. This is the most challenging question that we have today. The thing is, who is responsible? Where do you get the sponsorship? That's a thing that we always struggle with. If you look at the job titles, might be in the information technology division. So you might have the technology, but you won't have the information. So in the organizational structure-wise, you are in IT, so you are supposed to be responsible for the information, which means you're responsible for the data. But the issue is you don't create data, neither you consume data. So you're in the middle being responsible in some way, but you don't do it. And sometimes you might be having a system or centralized system but you can't put it together because your data is scattered and has different standards. So you can't have one system to bring it together like one data warehouse. So you have multiple data warehouse by region or by country because you don't have data standards. So there is thing, and you might have a chief information officer, and he says he's information, so he has to deliver it. So there's a problem, but he can't be the sponsor as well at the same time. So how do you find a sponsorship is a big question that we all have. We don't have a right answer, but we can have some different organizations behave differently. If it's a CEO with more manufacturing based or operation based, he will have a different way of looking at it. If he's a CEO who is more customer oriented, more innovative, he might be looking at a different way, looking outward. So he doesn't see the importance of this side, but he will see the importance of innovating, coming new products. Yeah, that's where the money will go. That's where he likes to put the money is to get his return on. So the return, you look at the return that you can get out of it and the sponsorship where you can get it. Getting sponsorship, every time you get a sponsorship, you'll have to show something that you're coming out, return. And the data quality, it improves something, but it doesn't give you a bottom line improvement sometimes. So it's a difficult question. So one thing is you are the consumer, right, or supplier sometimes. Somebody to find the consumer and say, you're consuming this data, so that's a problem because we have 10 people manually doing this to get you the report. But the CEO doesn't see it or the board doesn't see it because they get the report. P&L comes, balance sheet comes, sales reports comes, they are fine. But there might be 10 people doing it manually. So you have to go and say, okay, there's this thing that we have about 10 people and it's not efficient, it's manipulation, it doesn't comply. So one card to play is compliance to say what it's. Next thing is you might have systems all around the world because of the pre-era, before we couldn't put all the data into one system, like millions of data, or the bandwidth was not enough, so it takes a long time, so you have systems all over the place. So you have different people entering data. So there's one way is now, when you collect all the data, you can't use it. So it all happens manually, and they send on Excel worksheets, and Excel suddenly turns out to be your ETL layer, and links, and it gives in your report, dashboards, but it's all manual. So from a compliance point of view, you have issues. So how do you put together? So this is what I'm going to look into the slide. So one thing is, if you have a good roadmap for master data, that will be great. So you have a long-term plan by object or process. So the next thing is you have to look at the 7 elements, or they call the 7S framework. Your system, the hard ones are system. The first are the strategy. So you need to have a good strategy, then you have to have a good system in place to put this together, and you need to know how you're going to do the staffing, because you need to have a structure. So the hard factors have to be done, because these are things that you have to get the board to endorse. It should be a top-down approach. If you can't get the strategy and the systems and the staff in place to do it, you're not going to go very far. They have to endorse it and they have to see. So you need to sell it somehow. Though you're in IT or where, you have to be a marketing person to get this to the management board. That's the business case, very key on that. So other thing is, one is CapEx and OpEx. People tend to not put CapEx, but you can sneak through the OpEx. So now you have things coming with iClouds or cloud systems and base. So you tend to pay only as use, as a usage base. So that's the good way of coming, and people are tempted to go there. Though they look at security issues, though my data is somewhere else, I don't know who is using it. But they find, oh, I can't get management board to give the CapEx, so I use the OpEx route. So that happens in businesses now. So services it starts building. I think that services has a big market now, because CapEx is something that people don't want to put millions in one go there, but they're happy to put $3,000 or $5,000 every month to start with. And next thing is the strategy. You might have a strategy of integrating or buying, backward integration, buying the suppliers, or forward integration, buying the customers. So then you have to see your data, or you might be doing a forecasting with the customer or supplier, integrated forecasting. So then you look, how my data going to be? So those are the things that you look and see, based on this, can I look, there's an issue now in the business. They want to do something. You need to know what the business is going, the strategy, the direction, and you have to take that and convert it into your business case. Because if you go and say, oh, I have a data quality issue, give me some money to resolve it, you won't get it. You have to find a way of selling it. And you have to look at things that are happening in the business. And you can say, you can't do this business strategy because I don't have data standards. I need to put a system in place. I need to put a staff in place to get this right. And then you start, and then they will see, oh, realize he has a point, because you can't aggregate or you can't talk with the customer. EDIs will not work properly. So therefore, let's do it differently. Next thing I would touch is, sometimes businesses have pain points. You might have a planning cycle. Most organizations have, like we have as well. So what we found is, when you're in our planning cycle, is all the data standards differ in different SAP clients or all the other ERP or legacy systems you have. So how are we going to put it together? You can't bring it together, you can't integrate it. What you do is you manually bring in files. So you have people downloading and sending files, someone uploading, and you have a central integration plan. It's good. But you don't know what's happening in middle. Are they changing stuff? So what you want to do is you want to integrate the whole thing and make it quicker, faster. Decision making should be faster. So, but you need to have the information to be there. You don't want to take a planning cycle, take 3 months. You just want it to do in a week if possible, or 2 weeks. So you need to look at things that you can get a lead from. There is an issue here, there is a pain point here. Let me take that out and turn it into a business case. So you have to always know what the business is doing. But as IT, you have some responsibility. From business point of view, they will say, oh, I have to do this, I can't put the system together. I will extract it and put it, and I'll put some manning, because when I was working in supply chain, if I have issue, I'll tell IT takes time to, or they don't understand it. I get someone to do it. And you do it 3 times, and then you have a link, you have Access database or a SQL database that does the job for you. And I'm doing on my own, and if you have 10 businesses, all 10 are doing the same thing, or a bit differently. But you get the results, that's fine, but it's not the way of working it. It's not the operational excellence, or it's not the way the IT should be behaving. So IT has to see all these things, and they need to pick up the points and create a business case. Next thing is, when you come to compliance, there are new rules coming up now. You need to see the data lineage from end to end, from where the data is coming, the source. Sometimes the person is creating, say, there's an end use. Say this is being used for a shoe, for example. But the person who's entering will see what is the first line of the drop down. It might be it's been used for cups. He will pick that because he doesn't want to worry about it, because it doesn't affect him. He just wants to get a sales order, get the sales done. Local business, done it. The person who's sitting centrally on the board, who is looking at sales by the end use, will find, oh, I'm selling more into the cups. But really, it's not the case, but it's going somewhere. The decision becomes wrong, because he was investing in the wrong place. Because the person has not taken into accountability, he's not taking the accountability of seeing where it's been used and how important the value is. So you need to tie up these two, because the garbage in is garbage out. But it might you might not see it as garbage. You might see it, oh, wow, I invest there. But you're investing in the wrong place because you don't know the garbage is coming in. So it becomes IT responsibility sometimes to see if it's garbage or is the information correct. So you need to do some auditing processes, which doesn't exist in most organizations today.
So you almost need to be the sort of eyes and ears of the organisation.
That's correct.
Really, yeah.
Well,
I think you just said a really interesting point there. You need to be able to audit the data. I think it's IT's responsibility to provide the insight into the data, and it's business's responsibility to interpret the results of that data audit.
That's correct.
You know, quite often you'll provide, yes, it's technically this, it's technically that, but you don't really understand the business process from an IT perspective. And I think it's a joint collaboration. I think that data audit thing is really key to helping build the business case.
Yeah, and I was speaking with a Gartner analyst a few weeks ago, and she typically has covered the governance, risk, and compliance side of the business. So, dealing with how do organizations deal with Sarbox in the U.S. and Basel II if you're an insurance company over here, or whatever the case may be. She said for the last 3 to 5 years, the regulators have all been focused on process. Do you have a documented process of how you compile your financial information? Do you have a documented process? And a lot of the big consultancies have made a lot of money helping companies develop those processes. She said the regulators are pretty comfortable that most companies have done that now. And now the next thing they're talking about is information governance. Do you have the lineage in the end? Do you have transparency in your data? And that's what they're beginning to focus on from an insistence in being able to prove that and document that. And if you have all these manual cutouts along the way in your financial reports as you're rolling up the information, that's a big problem. So yeah, for sure, that's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, when external auditors come, they will ask, okay, if I have a finance report, how do I ensure that this is right? Can I extract from your system and look at it? But you won't, because there are processes in the middle which has changed the data in. So you need to be having the full lineage, the full process integrated, so that you have full compliance from end to end. If not, it's like a manufacturing operation. You put inputs, you control inputs, and the processes you have to control, and so that you get the output clean. Right now, in many organizations, there are many people who can change data or add data. The processes are not there, so they manipulate in the middle, but you get the end result. Maybe your end result is right, maybe it's wrong. You don't know, and it's very hard to audit as well. And the next thing is a big card that I play in the organization, always networking capital. Say you have creditors days or debtors days, then credit terms. How do you see the purchasing manager, the head of global supply chain, doesn't see it. He doesn't see it at fingertips. Where's my credit? 60% is 30 days or 90% is 30 days. He doesn't see it. It takes a lot of time for him to get it. So those are the key. If he wants to make a strategy or decision, let's make it 35 days and reduce my networking capital. How is he going to implement it? So if you have the information to make decisions, it's good. So your networking capital, other side is your stocks. Look at your stocks and say, okay, because there are same product in 10 different places in different names. You are creating additional stocks. So try to get into one code. Maybe you manufacture in one place and you hold in one place, like a mother stock, and you distribute, or you reduce your safety stock, because you can have it in one place and supply that place. So you reduce your safety stock. So your inventory will reduce. So your networking capital will come down. And that is directly adding into your bottom line. Selling is difficult. Sometimes you can reduce your stock and save a lot.
Well, that's a really important point. We did some work for a big supply chain, FMCG, and they were moving product data all over Europe. And we found one row of erroneous quality problem with product, because the product codes were different between the sort of sales unit and the factory, which basically caused them to overproduce stock because they thought they'd run out of stock, but actually there was stock in another place. That's just one row of data. That was 150 grand euros of new production in a product. It was a big company. But it's finding those people who care about that. And someone owns the quality of a product you sell to a customer. It's getting someone to actually own the quality of the data that supports that process is the hard thing.
That's true.
Surely once you can show 150,000 euros of cost that doesn't need to be there, then you'll find an owner pretty quickly after you flag it up to the business.
It's getting someone to really want to own that process is the politics side of things, which is challenging.
Sure.
And I think it's critical, just to wrap up. When I first got into the data governance, data quality business about it's probably like 10 or 12 years ago now, I originally thought it was the perfect product solution to sell to organizations, because I thought it was a 3-question kind of thing. Number 1 is, do you have data? Yes. Number 2 is it as good as you'd like it to be? No. And would you like to talk about how to make it better? And then, yes, it's a 3-question, and you're having a nice conversation around ways you can help. But after a decade of doing this, what I found is actually there's 4 questions, which is, would you like to spend a substantial amount of money to make it better? No. is always the first answer. And then you get back to building the business case so that you can answer that fourth question. The first three questions are easy. The fourth one is the hard one, and that's really is working with organizations both internally and nice organizations like ENTOTA that can help build those business cases out to prove why this is where it's impacting the business and then quantifying that so then you can go get sponsorship.
Well, I've got a question here from the audience which ties into that quite nicely because it's about when to go through that process. And we are running very short on time, so I'm going to put this one to you, Scott, and then I'm going to have to move on to close the second poll. The question is, we're looking at implementing a new ERP system. Does it make sense to commence the data governance or analysis process ahead of this project?
Please do.
It definitely makes sense that you should do it, if nothing else, while you're implementing ERP, because to Clive's point, they do a lot of work on data migration into SAP. All that stuff you're learning out of your old systems that you're going to move over to your new ERP system, all those business rules, all the types of data, that is the core of your master data. That is the core of your all these rules are going to help you downstream. Don't do it as throwaway work. Don't do it and say, we're done, we got the system up and running. If you can begin that data governance process in parallel and extend it beyond your go live of SAP or whatever ERP system you're implementing, then you're leveraging and saving yourself a huge amount of money. So the answer is yes, you absolutely should get people to pay attention to this up front and think about it and not think because you're making a large investment on ERP and implementing that's going to fix all the problems. Because it'll fix some of the problems. It'll fix the process problems, but it's not going to always fix the data problems if you don't look beyond it.
And it will reduce the cost of your SAP deployment.
Yes.
And it will reduce the risk of a successful ERP deployment and make sure that when it goes live, the business actually understands and owns the quality of that data and they're comfortable with the go live.
Yep.
You know, we had a recent, I say the sector had a migration into SAP. And they had to start again. It cost them 1.6 million to basically scrap the data and try and clean it up and redo it. So yeah, please do it beforehand.
Okay, we've got a pretty resounding yes there then to that. If there's any doubt there, that is a yes, to that question. Okay, we are running low on time as I've mentioned, so I'm going to scoot over to the second poll now and tell you the results. And we asked, are your organisation's primary data repositories ever cleaned up or deduplicated? And we've got about a quarter of people saying, as the data governance policy dictates, and the same percentage of people saying never. It's never cleaned up or deduplicated. Behind that, just a bit less than 20% of people saying when we have time, and then saying the data pertinent to each project is cleaned at the commencement of the project, and then smaller percentages saying annually or once. So quite a spread actually, quite a spread of people there, alarming that a quarter of people never clean up their data. Maybe after today's web seminar that will change. Unfortunately though, time has beaten us for today, so that is all we have time for. So on behalf of our audience, I'm going to say thank you very much to Suresh, Scott and Clive and John for your insights today. Also thank you to you for your excellent questions during the web seminar. I certainly hope you found our answers comprehensive and useful. We've been talking about enterprise data governance. Thanks for attending the web seminar. Goodbye.